Hello everybody, I'm Jeanette and you're visiting the Neal's Homestead. You've caught me today sitting in the rocking chair, but it's not because I get a chance to sit and rock and rest myself. It's because I'm sitting by about 125 pounds of tomatoes that I'm going to sort through. We have a lot of varmints on our place and they all seem to like tomatoes, especially the raccoons. So we typically pick our tomatoes when they start looking like this. Well, the research I've seen says that after they reach this point, the sugars in them don't increase anymore. I don't know if I believe it 100% or not, but we're taking the chance that they're going to be just as good if they're starting to blush like this. After we pick them, we bring them into the house and we put them in these crates. We put a towel along the bottom of the crate to protect the tomatoes from the holes that are in the bottom of the crate because they can make some damage if you leave them in there too long. Now, we always did this while we were selling our tomatoes, and whenever you are selling tomatoes, of course they have to look better than the tomatoes you're willing to eat. So it's not such a big deal if they're tomatoes that I'm just going to use, but I am in the habit from selling tomatoes, so I still do it mostly. Tomatoes actually ripen better in the dark, which is contrary to what many of us have grown up hearing and what many of us still believe today. And so we put them in these crates, we stack the crates up, and it creates a darkness in there even if it's daylight and there's a light on. And of course overnight it's dark in the house, and if I want to I can lay another towel over the top to kind of cover up the top layer and create some more darkness. These are tomatoes that have been in here for several days, and I can tell that they're ready because they get a little bit soft. You can't always tell by the color here because this variety sometimes has a lighter color right here even though it is fully ripe. For our main crop of tomatoes, we really prefer the Mountain Merit variety. This year, I can't even remember what happened, but a lot of my Mountain Merit tomatoes expired. And I ended up with Red Deuce tomatoes, which was my second choice, and we did kind of half and half. But in the process of everything, we lost too many of the Mountain Merits, and we've mostly got Red Deuce here. Now, these two varieties are both a commercial variety of tomatoes. We feel like they taste really good. The skin is slightly more tough than on an heirloom tomato, but our production and disease resistant is not to be compared to heirloom tomatoes. And this is why we do tomatoes like this instead of all heirloom tomatoes. Now, this year we do have a few heirloom tomatoes. Mostly what we've got heirloom this year is pineapple tomato, and they are very good. They're very tasty, but the production is not good, and they are soft and they kind of fall apart really quickly. The pineapple tomatoes are kind of a lot of them have yellow, but they have little mixtures of red mixed in there. You can see in this jar a little better. See that red blotches in there? Well, the pineapple tomatoes have kind of they're mostly yellow, but they have a red stripe in them. These are the last batch of tomatoes that I did, so I need to get them put away and get started on canning some more tomatoes. Well, I make sure the jars are clean, and these aren't too bad, so I'm just wiping the tops off. I put the jars in a suitable box. And then I write the year on the lid of every jar. And on the end of the box, I write the year and what's in the box. I don't have a great pantry to hold everything that I'm producing, so we've kind of turned our extra bedroom into a food storage area, and I'll just put them in there. I have this huge stainless steel bowl, and I figured out that if I pile it up high, that is about 28 pounds, and what it takes to get 2 canners full of tomatoes. When I'm ready to start canning, I'll use this 3-gallon pot and fill it about 60% full of hot water out of my tap and put it on my stove. I fill up my sink with cold water and give them all a really good rinse. When the water is boiling, I'm ready to put the tomatoes in. And what I try to do is like put all large tomatoes in. Maybe try to pick out the largest ones that I put in, because they might need a little bit longer to cook. They don't really cook, but to heat. And put them in there as fast as I can. When I feel like I've got enough, I wait a few seconds, like maybe 30 seconds, and stir it around just a bit. Make sure there's not any cool water pocketed somewhere down in there around a tomato. Some of them want to float and some of them sink. The nicer tomatoes are the ones that sink. And it seems to me like it takes a little bit longer for those ones that float to let their skin crack. When I feel like it's been long enough, I'll try to fish out the smaller tomatoes first. And try to do this as, see, that one right there is cracked already. Try to do this as quickly as possible. After I've got them all out, I'll put the lid on and let that come to a boil again for the next batch of tomatoes. And I'm going to get these over into a sink of cold water. And then I'll just keep going at it over here until I get them all blanched so that the skin will peel off easily. When I've got my tomatoes all blanched and cooled and they're all in this side of the sink, I'll drain that water out so I can work in this sink. With a colander to catch the peelings and the core, I'll put 1 jar at a time in here, and I like to use this kind of a knife. It's actually a steak knife. It has very fine serration on here, and I can cut into the tomato, and it's the gripping of the serration helps me to get it cut out easily. And then I just have to peel off all the skin around. Then I've got my jar funnel here, and what I do is cut up the tomatoes in ununiform shapes and, you know, kind of uniform sizes, but I don't care about the shape of each one being the same. I just try to get this job done as quickly as possible with the least amount of trouble, what I see as trouble for myself. When my jar is full, what I'll use is, this is the handle off of a silicone spatula, and I'm just going to drive it down in there, and it tears up the tomatoes and it pushes the air out of it, because there are little pockets of air caught down inside the tomatoes, and I want to get all of them worked out. And then I'll judge how full my jar is. Now I want the jar to be full to here. If you fill it any farther, it will spew out while you're canning it. I found tomatoes to be really tricky, and if you're not careful, if you let it boil too hard, or if you fill that jar too full, it will cause it to do what they call siphoning, and then you'll end up with losing a whole bunch of the tomato juice out of your jar, and you also risk that a seed has floated up there and doesn't let the lid seal down. So be very careful not to fill your jar too full. I'll show you this jar that I did in 2017, and you can see that much of it cooked out. Now this one went ahead and sealed. Obviously no seed got up in there, but I lost a lot of the tomatoes out of there. So I've learned how to be a little bit more careful by not filling it too full. And another thing that I've learned when doing it is whenever you're heating your canner up, don't let it boil too hard. Keep the simmering down when you're letting it vent, and don't heat it up too fast, because I think the cooking inside the jar makes that expand. Now what happens with tomatoes is that the solids will be sucked up to the top during the process, and all the liquid part will stay down below, and those solids will get up there and push on the lid too if you've got it too full. So that's just something I've been trying to learn, how to get my tomatoes canned, and make sure all the lids seal, and make sure that part of my tomato juice hasn't cooked out of my jars before they're sealed. When I've got my jars filled up and I've got the air worked out of all of them, the next thing I'll do is take some canning salt. I'm going to put a teaspoon in the top of each one of them. Now you don't have to do this. If you want to salt your product that you're going to make out of your tomatoes later, you can. This is a common practice, but you don't have to do it. Then I'll take a clean, damp cloth and I'll wipe down the top of every one of them. I use my funnel to do it, so they shouldn't be too bad. I'm not really picking up any tomato. If it was messy on the top, there's a piece, I would probably do it twice, but since they seem pretty clean already, I'm only going to do it once. I have some lids in some warm water, and I'll be putting one lid on top of each jar. And one of my jars is a wide mouth, so I've got a wide mouth lid. And then I have rings, so put that on and tighten that down next. Next thing is to get the canner ready. It takes about a gallon of water to put 2 inches worth of water in the bottom of my canner. And I'm using hot water. The water in my house that comes out of my water heater is not very hot, which is fine mostly. So I'm going to go ahead and use some hot water. You wouldn't want to use boiling water, because the shock of the hot water with your cool jars of tomatoes could present a problem. But for me, the hot water's fine out of my faucet. And just measure about 2 inches with my finger. It's up to there. That's how much water I need. I'm going to go ahead and turn the burner on. Now all I have to do is get the lid on there and tighten it down and start letting it heat. When you let steam come out of that for 10 minutes, then I'm going to put the 10-pound weight on and let it get up to pressure, and then we'll turn the burner down. Pressure can tomatoes at 10 pounds for 25 minutes. And that finishes another 14 quarts of tomatoes.